Hi, I'm John Trischler from Specialty Performance Parts, and today we're going to show you how to install our new universal cross mounts and light bar kits for your Gen 3 Raptor front bumper without drilling, cutting, or modifying your truck in any way. Let's get started on the install. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the hardware that is included with the main brackets. All right, so these are your main brackets. So regardless of any other part of the kit that you get, you're going to get these main brackets that are going to bolt to your bumper, because they're going to be included with any of these other components that you get are going to have this hardware set. So let's go through this hardware set real quick so you understand what each piece is for. All right, so first, you're going to use the factory bolts on the back side of your bumper here to mount these. Unless you have a vehicle that does not have the factory fog lights in it. In that case, you're going to be missing these U-nuts and bolts. And so those are included in that case. If you already have a Raptor that has factory fog lights, you'll have the bolts and U-nuts included, so you won't need these. If you have our factory fog lights, you'll also have these nuts and bolts, so you won't need these. These spacers are going to be used to even out where these brackets bolt to the back side of the bumper because of this cross brace that's built in on the back side of the bumper here, and that will allow you to move that bracket evenly across there, and then you're going to be able to slide your factory bolts in on the back side of the brackets. These are going to be rubber stops. These are designed to just give that extra reinforcement if there's any flex or movement with those brackets with the weight on the front, where it's going to be able to rest on the front bumper. And those are going to sit on the bottom side of the bracket, just like you see here. These little push pins, these ribbed push pins, once you slide your bracket in from the top side, you'll be able to slide these in from the top side to hold those in place. This way, because you don't have access to really get a bolt or anything under there, this way you can get those in there and retain those without having to take the front trim panel off of the front grille. And these last bolts and nuts and washers are to replace with black the bolts that come with your factory fog lights. So if you wanted to replace those bolts, you can get these instead and take out the regular silver stainless steel ones to have those black bolts in there as well. All right, so that's your hardware setup for your main brackets to get everything installed, regardless of if you get the brackets for light bars or the cross mount. All right, our last set of nuts and bolts are going to be important because these, which are a carriage bolt, and they're blackened as you see with these lock nuts, are going to fasten down either your cross mount or your light bar mounts to these main brackets right here in these slots. So you have two for each side so that you can line those up and tighten those down. They're black, so they're not going to be very visible. It's going to look nice and clean, but that is going to work for regardless of if you have the cross mount or the fog brackets. All right, real quick, I just want to touch on one real quick thing. Just depending on when you get your kit, you may end up with an 8mm bolt and flange nut, or you may end up with a 5/16 bolt washer and standard lock nut. The flange nut replaces the washer. The problem is they don't make a flanged lock nut in a 5/16. So, you know, the first batch we have is designed for 5/16, and the next go round we'll probably adjust that hole slightly so that it will accommodate that 8mm. Either one's fine, they're both just as strong as the other. It's just one less piece of hardware. All right, so if you're going to use a 50-inch curved light bar on here, you're not going to have any additional mounts there. You're going to go directly into these slots here, and you may be able to use these two bolts right here to tighten those down. If you do prefer to take the trim panel off of the front here, like we have for prototyping, you can do that pretty easy. Inside the wheel lip here, there are some 7mm bolts, kind of dark there, but you'll see them when you get there. These 7mm bolts, you just take those out in the bottom and the front here, and then you can pop these little notches out of their sockets, and then you just take and work that piece of trim from each side until you get to the middle. And then, you know, don't stretch it. You just want to kind of work it and it'll pop it out of the little sockets there. And then you can remove that nice and easy. And this is what it's going to look like. All right, so this is going to be where the 3 bolts are going to be that you're going to use. And I wanted to kind of point these out by backing these out so you can see them. It's kind of hard to get in there from underneath to show you the video. And you won't have to take this trim panel off. We just did it here for development and so that you can kind of see where everything goes from the top side. But you can do all this from the bottom side. So you'll see these 3 bolts. This factory one here, this goes through a brace. All right, these 2, if you have the factory fogs, this is going to be for the main plastic part of the factory fog housing, where you're going to leave that. This one is going to be where the tab for the black cover that covers the back of the fog lights would go. In this case, you're going to pull that cover back, all right? Instead, you're going to insert these 2 washers where that black back cover was. The back cover is then going to go, that tab is going to bow out a little bit, but it's going to sit on the back side of your bracket. These 2 spacers are going to space that out, so that's going to be even with the tab here for your factory fogs. If you don't have the factory fogs, then you're just going to use these bolts the way that they are. You won't need the washers at all. This is with our triple fog bracket. It's already spacing that out the way you'd want it for matching up here to that brace portion there. And if you didn't have fogs at all, then you're going to use one of these 2 spacers in place of where this triple fog bracket is. As you see here, that takes that out about 1/8 of an inch. Same thing for those spacers. That's going to line that all up and make it even. All right, so now we've got all the bolts in there. As you see, here's our bracket. Now before we tighten this all down, I just want you to see it here from the top side. We've got our 3 bolts inserted in place, and it's important that you don't tighten any of them down until you get all 3 of them in, or you may not be able to line them all up correctly. We've got them started and they're loose. We've got our bracket in here, as you see, and now you've got some room here. You can slide the bracket in and out. If you have a 50-inch light bar, you're probably going to have to scoot it in a little bit. If you're going to use one of the brackets for the 40-inch light bars, you're still going to have some room here, although you can slide it in or out. And the same thing for the cross mount. You may need to adjust it slightly depending, but you still should have a little bit of room. Obviously, you want to slide it in as much as possible so that you have less hanging out there, but there's some room for error, so you should be fine. All right, and this is the point where we can slide our rubber stop underneath it here. Then we can press our push pin in through that hole. All right, so now we've got our trim panel back on, and so as you see, if you don't take the trim panel off, and it's always a good idea to use, you know, masking tape just to protect your painted surfaces as you're putting stuff across your bumper and so on. But if you don't take your panel off, which you shouldn't need to, you should be able to wiggle it in from the back side there. Basically, you see this rubber strip here. That's what this is going to rest on. So you should be able to just slide this in from the back side. You see this over the rubber strip, like I'm doing with this piece of plastic. And so you'll slide that in. You might need something, because it does go this direction, to kind of hold it down. But you should be able to slide this in from the back side just like this, so that it comes out the front just like this. And if you have to, you know, have something to press this rubber piece down to do that, then to keep that flap from coming forward, then you can do that. But it'll come forward just like this, and you see then there's our hole where we're going to be able to put our rubber stop. All right, so now I've got our rubber stop under there. You can see I put our push pin through there, which is holding it in place. And I've got it resting right there on the bumper. I don't know if you can see, I ended up using one of our spacer washers here underneath of here just to push it down that much more, just for that added support. So there's no more flexibility. If you don't need these, if you don't have, or if you have factory fogs or whatever and you don't need these, or you have the triple fogs, or even if you just get another spacer, just depending on how you mounted it in there, if you get that nice and tight, that's just going to give you that added durability. Again, that's not going to flex here in the front, and that should be really, really stout with that in there. There's a little bit of flex here. Without it, you can see not much for the heavy lights, but boy, if you put that washer in there, there's nothing, because that bumper is helping support the front side of that, and it keeps it nice and clean. All right, so now we're going to take a look at installing light bars onto our side brackets. And each light bar's, all right, so now we're going to go ahead and take a look at installing some light bars on the light bar mounts. These light bar mounts, as we showed you with the hardware, then are going to attach to the post mounts that come on the Raptor bumper. There are two different style mounts, all right? This style, which has a little longer nose, is going to work for your Adapt series from Rigid and your Baja Designs Onyx 6. Those are a little longer and they come out a little further. We made an additional bracket right here. It's got a shorter nose, and the reason we made that additional bracket is because your other light bars, your Rigid E series, SR series, the Radiance, the Baja S8, and most other standard light bars are not as deep as far as the casing goes, so you'd want to bring those back some. Using this bracket with multiple holes on it, the light bar would sit behind the nose, and so that's why we did two different styles. So again, if you have the Onyx 6 or the Rigid Adapt series like you see here, this is just upside down, you're going to want the longer nosed brackets. They should be identifiable pretty easy with the additional slots here that the shorter brackets don't have, or they just have the 3 holes. So we're going to move these, all right, out of the way, and we're going to start with our Adapt, all right? Now, on the side of the Adapt, I'm not going to move the camera right here, but on the side of the Adapt, you've got hex screws here on the side, and you need to take those off to put your brackets on. If you'll notice, I've got the one screw still attached slightly. These little plates that hold everything in place, there's some nuts inside here. They hold those in place. They want to fall off as soon as you take those screws off. So just a little tip, because you do have to take those screws off to put the brackets on. If you get some masking tape or something, and you just put some tape on that for a minute, just to hold that little plate on, just put it at the edge where it's not going to really affect having your bracket put on there. You can peel it up easily. If you want to do that, that'll kind of hold this in place so that you can take both screw sets out. All right, just like so. And we'll do that on the other side. And again, just kind of put it at the edge so you got plenty of clearance there for the light bar itself. Now we can turn this right side up, as you see with this light bar. And this is the front side, front facing side of your light bar. Here's the lens and so on. So this is going to be on your driver's side. Over here, this is your passenger side. Again, we've got our brackets, so this is facing forward. The nose, you want this nose to be facing forward. So we're going to line this up with the holes here on the side. Your slot here in the middle and the hole, these are the two you want to use for the Adapt series. On the Onyx 6 model, you're going to use the front hole and the back slot. So we're gonna line these up here in this front slot. And I'm gonna get that started, but actually we need to put our washer on first. So we're gonna put our washer on and get this started right in here through that lock nut that's in there. We're gonna do the same thing for the second one. We'll get that started. Now that we've got it started, that plate's not gonna fall off. We can go ahead and take our tape off. Now that you got room before you tighten it down all the way. And so now that plate's not gonna fall off and those nuts aren't gonna fall out of there. And then we just do the same thing for the other side. We can go ahead and tighten up our set screws here. And we can tighten them up fairly decent. We don't want the thing flopping around as we try to lay it out and install it onto our bumper mounts. And then once you get these installed and tied down on your bumper mounts, then you can loosen these up a little bit and you'll be able to adjust and tilt that light bar. So we'll get it somewhat snug and keep our main brackets here kind of flat to the table. Don't tighten it all the way where you're putting all your weight into it. Just get it hand tight like this, just enough where it's not going to move on its own. And then again, do that on both sides, and then you'll be ready to insert that on the truck. As you see, we've got our brackets on both sides, and I can take this, and they're not gonna flop around, so it's nice and solid. And then we can lay these two plates now on our bumper mounts, put in our carriage bolts. You don't have to worry about the thing flopping around too much. Get those tightened down. Once we do that, we'll be able to loosen these up a little bit if we want to tilt it and adjust how it aims forward. Okay, so now we have our adapt light bar. And again, we showed you how to put those brackets on the side. We've got those on here and somewhat snug, so we're ready to go. We can try to keep our cord out of the way here. We can go ahead and lay these down now on our brackets, just like so. And then we can get our bolts and nuts and get that started on each side. Be careful, it is a little heavy. We'll get those started here with one on each side, and then we can go on to the next one. Once you get one set on there, it kind of holds itself in place pretty well. As you see, put our other bolt in there, line that up there with the bracket. And again, you're gonna have lock nuts, so it probably isn't a bad idea to have some additional help to hold it, because you're not gonna be able to spin those on there as freely as this. But the lock nuts are gonna be a lot more durable in the long run because they can't vibrate and loosen up where a standard nut and washer can. So now we have both sides on. And again, we can tighten this the rest of the way down here with a 13mm socket when we're ready. But I've got this snug somewhat for right now. And you can see it's very stable, especially by putting those additional rubber stops there on the bumper. That's gonna help support that extra weight because this is a very big and heavy light bar. Now, make sure again these are tight for the most part for what we're working on here. Now remember before I told you can now loosen up these set screws on the side and you can swivel that. So let's go ahead and do that now just a little bit. We're gonna just loosen these just a tiny bit on each side where it's not gonna just fall through that slot, but we can pivot it. All right, I think that should work. So now you can see I can move that light bar up and down depending on how I want to angle it. And then once you get it where you want it, you can go ahead and tighten those back the rest of the way. And then from here, it's just a matter of wiring. Now, if you chose the adapt light bar, you got this long cord here, obviously, you can take that in. And just how we showed you how you can push this little rubber seal down to slide your brackets out, you can do the same thing to slide your cord in underneath and behind the bumper here, so that's nice and hidden. As far as wiring installs go on this adapt, we're not going to get into that because as you can see, the wiring is a lot more complex. So you're not going to use our harnesses with this Adapt. It has some special controllers and things that you're going to need that control the different lights, the different zones, and so on. So you'll probably want a professional installer for that as far as the wiring goes. But as far as the hardware goes, installation, you can see the Adapt is now available to install on your Gen 3 Raptor front bumper, just like this. It looks phenomenal, guys. You're gonna love it. I can't wait to see it all powered up. All right, since people always ask, you know, how much does the front light bar block the front camera? So this is the Adapt here in the front. And as you can see, you can still see through the front camera there. You'll see the Adapt here in the bottom portion of that camera, but you can still see it pretty well. And here it is on the other screen. The way that kind of angles that, it kind of looks a little distorted there in the front, but again, you can still see that. It doesn't block your front camera. It blocks the lower portion partially, but again, the Adapt is also the largest and the longest facing light bar that you're gonna get for this kit, so it's gonna stick out the most. So this is the front view with the Adapt. All right, so now we have our full-size Radiance light bar and our slimline SR series rigid Radiance light bar. These Radiance light bars have amber backlights in them, although the SR series, it's RGB, so you can change the colors to different colors if you like, although amber is the most popular here for the front of these trucks. These are also the same size cases if you got the equivalent SR series rigid Pro or the double row E series rigid light bars. And these are straight light bars because the front of the Raptor bumper is actually pretty well flat in these Gen 3s, where it was very rounded in the Gen 2s. So these actually look really good in this, as you'll see. But that's why they are straight, because there's been some question about that with the previous gen being a rounded or curved light bar. But again, these represent both the E series and the Radiance, and the SR series Pro and the SR Radiance light bars. As I had mentioned before, these are the short snouted brackets. These are going to work with most of your other light bars, where those other longer brackets work with just the Onyx 6 and the rigid Adapt series light bar. So we're going to install these on the side of these light bars. I'm going to show you, because these do have 3 holes in them for different positions for different light bars. I'm going to show you where to put these on these 2 particular light bars. And again, you can find the best position depending on what other 40-inch light bar you do install on here. All right, so on our full-size light bar here, we are going to use this center hole that's further back, because the back of the case is actually shorter in the double-size light bar than it is here on the low profile. So this hole back here fits best here for this particular light bar. We'll get that in there, and then we can start our nut. Kind of get this somewhat straight here, where we've got our bracket here flat on the table, and go ahead and get that started, and then we can tighten that down and do the same thing on the other side. And it's going to be real easy to put this thing on there all at once. Same thing here for our SR series. These little plastic caps slide in over this, so they're kind of a little bit of a pain as far as holding those in place while you get these brackets started. But if you do that with your hand, if you do it on a table like this, it's a little bit easier. Now this one, again, because it needs to go further forward, we're going to use this bottom hole in the front position, just like this. All right, and then we can start that on there like this. All right, and as you see, we've got these on both sides here. We can tighten these down the rest of the way. Repeat that on the other side, and then your light bar is ready to sit on your bumper mounts and tighten down. We're gonna go ahead and take our Radiance light bar, and we're gonna install that. Again, we've got our L brackets already on our light bar, which are gonna rest on our bumper mounts, just like so. And we'll just line those up with our holes, and we can drop our bolts in. Now from here, we just need to run our wiring. And again, we can take this rubber cord, we can slide the cord in underneath of this rubber trim that's underneath of the front bumper trim panel here. And then you'll want to put your connector on if you have one of our harnesses, like with the Radiance light bars and so on. The lower power light bars, up to 20 amps typically, don't have a problem with the connectors. The ones that are closer to 30 or more, for example, your 50-inch curved light bars, your Pro Series and so on, that are way up there in amperage, you really do have to connect direct wire to direct wire, because the problem is the amperage getting through that wire. But most common here, we're gonna have the Radiance or the Radiance SR Series Radiance RGB Plus light bars, the low profile version. And those you can put the connectors on, plug in our plug and play harnesses, and so on. If you can't use our plug and play harnesses, you can still use our connectors at the switch wire ends off of the relay that's built in. So you'll slide this in, you'll put on your connector, you can plug in one of our harnesses, and then you're gonna run up to your switch wires. And then I'm gonna show you some footage on that from another install video to kind of step you through that as well without doing it all here again. We'll go ahead and show you this front camera screen with the full-size Radiance Plus, which would be the same as the E-Series rigid light bars. And you can see, again, not blocking your whole screen. You see it a little bit in the bottom, a little less than the bottom half. You can still use your screen. You can still see here in front with the 360 camera view and so on. So you're not gonna have an issue there. This just is gonna give you that frontal point saying that you don't go any further forward than this. And that kind of tells you where that all is. So you can see exactly how close you're getting to something, just like you always could before. All right, our last example here that we have is our Radiance SR Plus light bar, which is again, same size case as the rigid SR Pro. So these are gonna look the same other than the Radiance version not being as powerful for the main light, but having the backlight, in this case, the RGB backlight. And again, not as powerful as the Pro Series, but these are crazy powerful. In a lot of cases, you're gonna be very happy with the output that these light bars put out, in addition to the RGB backlight, which is really cool and very popular for these vehicles. So again, it sits there, it's a little lower profile, same setup. We've got our connector on this already, but it's gonna be easier for you to slide this in underneath of this trim panel if the connector is not on there. If you did put the connector on ahead of time, you can get a pin removal tool. We also have those if you need one available. And you just pop the little tool on top of these pins, it releases them, you pull them out the backside, you can slide the whole thing in there and put your connector back on. So this example is the Radiance SR Plus or the rigid Pro Series SR. Case size, as you see, little lower profile. See, it's still in the bottom of your camera, but not as quite as tall as the standard size. But again, you still have full view of your camera. It's not blocking the front camera. All right, real quick, let's take a look here at our 50-inch light bar example. This is a non-functioning light bar that Rigid sent us to test out and make sure everything fit all right, and it does. This is the curved light bar, which is what would be required in the 50-inch to work on these brackets. In a 40-inch, you're bringing the light bar forward because the center section is pretty flat. It only curves when you get to the outside corners. So in a 50, it curves around where it can hit those main mounts like this. But in a 40, not gonna work so well. That's why we went with the 40-inch straight light bars, and they look phenomenal in here. But we'll show you real quick how this lines up. And again, you just use these standard bumper mounts to attach the factory hardware to. All right, so here is our 50-inch curved light bar. You can see, let's go ahead and here go to the side. Installing this one. Should be able to see. You're going to take the factory L brackets. You want to see how they mount and go backwards. So you want it to angle with the nose here forward and the back edge to go backwards. That's how it's gonna clear. If you go the other direction, you swap sides with these brackets, they're not gonna line up right. It's gonna hit the grill and you're gonna say it's not gonna fit. But the 2 bolts will just go straight into those 2 slots right underneath of here. Just like so. We just have 1 bolt in there for this. And then you'll assemble your light bar just like this, and then you can adjust it and so on. But this is how it's gonna look. And you can also see how the curve of that looks with the front of the Raptor. Again, this Gen 3 Raptor does not curve very much in the front, so the light bar is gonna curve a little bit more. Doesn't look too bad in the 50-inch, again, because it comes over here where this starts coming in. You still have clearance here, not a ton, but you do have some. And then that's gonna fit on there nice and clean. And again, that's how far it's gonna come out. But you can get that 50-inch light bar on the front of your Raptor just like so. All right, the last example we're gonna give you here is our universal cross mount. For those of you that are not familiar with the universal cross mount, we've developed this for the previous Gen Raptor. Looked quite a bit different. I like the look of this one a lot better. I mean, this thing, it's stout, it looks awesome, it really does. We've got several bins in here for added strength. You're gonna be able to put the big lights on here. You can put the LP6s. You can put LP9s on there if you wanted to, for crying out loud. But you could put 4, 6 LP6s. You can put, you should be able to put up to, I'd say 8 XL series if you wanted to. Rigid 360s, the 6-inch version, you can put, and I'm gonna say at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least, maybe 8 onto this. I'd say especially if you use those outside slots. Self-explanatory for the most part, you got slots. You're gonna take your factory pod lights, whatever style you like. You're gonna put them across these slots, make them even, put your bolts through the bottom here, tighten those down. You can run your wiring and everything through there. We've got holes back here for you to tie down your wiring on the back side to help you make it nice and clean. You've got, again, your same 2 square holes on each end to put on your main bumper mounts. So you're gonna line that up there just like so. Line that up with those holes, and you're gonna drop these bolts down in those holes. And you're gonna tighten those nuts down as well, just like you would on the light bar. So again, the install portion itself is very similar in all these aspects, whether you use the curved light bar, you use the universal cross mount here, if you use a 40-inch straight light bar or an adapt light bar, the install is the same. So we've kept it really simple for you. And if you start out with a light bar and you decide, hey, I want to swap to this cross mount, you can do that. You can take your light bar off, you already have your base bumper mounts in place, and you simply swap to your cross mount, or vice versa. You start out with a cross mount, you decide you want a light bar, you can swap that out. So we like to keep everything so that you can, interchange. You don't have to throw everything away and start over. You can swap out pieces, swap out parts, and come up with whatever kind of custom install for any of this stuff that you want. And again, it's that simple. We put our additional bolts in on each end, put those nuts down, and you're gonna use a wrench because they're gonna have lock nuts on them. You're not gonna be able to turn them by hand like this. I just wanted this for speed. All right, and put your last bolt in, tighten everything down. You'll put your lights on. It may be easier to put your lights on before, but you can still do it while the cross mount's on there. So if you wanted to do it while the cross mount's on there instead of putting the lights on ahead of time, you can do it either way. You still have plenty of access underneath of here to get to those bolts to tighten everything down. And then you're gonna run your cords. You can run, at least your main cord, you're gonna run underneath of that rubber trim there, underneath of this panel like we talked about. And you can zip tie your excess cabling from your lights and things like that, either to the back side or the underside of this cross mount. And then we'll get into what we've been talking about on the last couple, get into your engine bay and where your wiring goes as far as connecting to your auxiliary switch wires, and you're all set. If you're worried about the camera, again, with our universal cross mount, it sits very low profile, lower than any of the light bars themselves. And you can simply put a couple of lights here to the outside. So let's say you had a couple of 360 rigid 360 6-inch lights. You can put 2 of them here on the outside, on each side, leave that center section open, and then you're gonna have a clear view with even more coverage of that front camera if you move those to the outside. Or if you want that cool look, you can just put them all the way across. You can put 4 of them, you can put 6 of them, you can stagger them, you can spread them out, and so on, and you'll have that cool look. But you can do anything that you want to with this setup, and that's what's so unique about this universal cross mount. You're not limited to just what is available to put on your bumper. All right, so we've got our switch wires here, and these are the 5 that are remaining. The number 1 switch is already taken up by the fog lights. All right, so now we have all of our connectors crimped onto our switch wires. You can see I've numbered those, so we'll know which ones they are real easily in the future without having. All right, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Visit us at spvparts.com for this kit and many more for your Gen 3 Raptor, Gen 2 Raptors, Broncos, and other vehicles. You're gonna wanna subscribe to this channel though, because we have new videos and new products coming out all the time. So you're gonna wanna be in on that. So again, subscribe to this YouTube channel and give us some comments and some ratings below. And if you installed this kit, let us know what you think of it. We'd love to hear from you. Leave us some comments. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.